So just to provide a little bit of information about independent living, without ideally my children screaming in the background, because there are a couple questions on your final exam about independent living services, okay? So throughout the country, there are centers for independent living, and they are a very important part of our community that every counselor should know about. And there are philosophical and historical origins to the independent living movement. So that is an actual dedicated movement that's a little bit different than the disability rights movement, okay? So independent living was not something that was always afforded to individuals with disabilities, right? I mean, if we're looking at the history of how people with disabilities were treated, the history doesn't look, it's pretty bleak, right? We would have individuals with disabilities housed in institutions where they were not given any opportunity for autonomy, where they were mistreated to the greatest extent in some cases, in many cases. So the independent living movement was obviously necessary. It's one that's incredibly important in the history of rehabilitation counseling, but in counseling in general, and the disability, the history of people with disabilities in our country as well. But really the important parts that came out of the independent living movement were that there was an agreement collectively as a society that yes, individuals with disabilities should be afforded the opportunity to live as freely and independently on their own terms, by their own free will, as possible, depending on the individual. So what that has come to now are, of course, centers for independent living. We have housing authorities that regulate how we afford housing to individuals with disabilities, how certain housing opportunities need to be accessible for individuals. And centers for independent living are important because they help members of our community that may find themselves in a new situation where they need to have some housing modifications, or maybe it is that a child is growing up and needs some support from a community agency that is staffed by people with disabilities and headed up by people with disabilities to help facilitate their development into an adult. So there are a lot of services that are provided by Centers for Independent Living that are free of charge for the people that they're serving. And in addition to that, the Centers for Independent Living provide jobs for people with disabilities in our communities as well. So it's important to know and be aware of your Centers for Independent Living, and that they're a very important part to the overall VOC rehab process, because if you think back to our basic needs, are our basic needs being met? Well, if somebody doesn't have housing, if that is not a basic need that has been met, then how can somebody even begin to consider employment, right? So sometimes voc rehab counselors need to connect with those centers for independent living, need to connect their clients so that the housing can get taken care of, so somebody has access to their restroom facilities, to take a shower before they go on an interview, to be able to exit their house safely, to be able to do all of those things before the job placement process begins, so that again, somebody's basic needs are being met. So that's really brief, super brief, but there are a lot of good information in the centers and the independent living notes that I provided for this week's lecture. Now, I did want to take another second just to kind of talk about what our future holds in the class. So you know that kind of in terms of assignments that are coming up, the final assignment for the course, the intent of it was to actually get you out there in the community, engaged with an agency, touring a facility, and I know completely that that might not happen at this point. So I'm in the process of kind of rethinking how that project might look, and bear with me on that. Obviously, I'm not going to expect you to go out and visit a facility if the facility is empty. That makes no sense, does it? So, it may be that you can find some of the information on websites for agencies, but that is what you all did already for your site identification project. So I just hate for you to be scouring agency websites again for more information. So I'm going to take a bit of time to think about that, but just know that it's on my radar as far as what is coming up. And just like I did with the The mid-semester exam, your exam 1, I'll be providing a little bit of an overview of what to expect on your final exam, because it's around the corner, and I don't want you to be left empty-handed with that one. So those are some things that are coming on the horizon, and with that, I'll leave you guys to the readings, the videos that are out there for this week, and the discussion board.